Hi, friend, and welcome back to the Brief with Danny. How have you been? July has been so eventful for me. I hope that it is also for you. Um, but anyway, have you ever wondered why so many foreign nationals see the Philippines as a rich market to invest in? Diba? Like, have you ever wondered? I mean, you as a Filipino, it's hard to grasp. But so tonight, I'll take you into a conversation that gives us an outside in perspective at the Philippine business landscape. So, Brian Pereira is an Australian leader who has grown deeply connected to the country, not just through work, but through genuine appreciation of our people and culture. So, we'll talk about leadership, legacy systems, and the delicate balance between applying global frameworks and honoring the local context. So, whether you are a foreign executive finding your footing here in our country, or you are a Filipino professional navigating growth within a foreign led business, this episode will offer you a warm, thoughtful lens on how business and culture can come together and why adapting with care actually makes all the difference. So, this is episode 10, Leading Across Cultures with Brian Ferreira. Hi, Brian. Good evening to you.
Good evening.
A rainy season. We're
Rainy
entering the
season.
rainy season.
In both countries, it's raining.
I know. But can you share a little bit of context and story of why and how did you, would I be bold enough to say that you fell in love with the Philippines as a market?
Yeah, you could be bold enough to say that. I've always had this, love for the Philippines because I grew up there as a young boy,
Mm-hmm.
um, and considered it my home. My family traveled a lot for my father traveled a lot for work, so we lived in many places, and I went to school in many places. And whenever anyone would ask me where I was from, I would say the Philippines. So for a long time, it was it was in my heart. It was my home, and I've done in my long career, I've done quite a lot of business in the Philippines. I've set up businesses in the Philippines for Australian businesses, for U.S. businesses. So it's still a very familiar place for me. And there are a couple of aspects which I really like, right? So one is I find it safe. I know some people don't think so. I find it a safe place to walk around in, and perhaps that's because of my comfort level.
Mm-hmm.
I find the people really engaging and engaging in a different way. I think you can find engaging people all over the world, but I think in the Philippines, that combination of "it'll be okay tomorrow" sort of approach, and the that nobody takes anything too seriously is a wonderful combination.
That's
Yeah.
true. That's a new perspective that I heard from foreigners that Philippines is safe. Because
Yeah, I mean, in any country, you can go to places where it's dangerous or where you're taking a bit of risk, either personally or business wise. And there are such places in the Philippines too. But, they are not the places that, a normal person would, go to.
Mhm. True.
Um,
That's true.
yeah. And when you meet Filipinos outside of the Philippines, they
Mhm.
manage to actually keep that same sort of, it's okay, life's hard, we're just going to enjoy ourselves sort of approach.
I think it's both a pro and a con, and it should be balanced.
Yeah, yeah, there are some cons to it. There are some cons to it. But if you know going in, you can manage it, right? So, I mean,
That's
yeah,
true.
in your role, you can actually see, your plans either well executed or not well executed, correct?
Correct.
And you can tell that it's always because of behavior.
Correct. It is always about behavior. I mean, everything is about behavior. Economics is about behavior. Business is about behavior.
Yeah.
um, but I have a question for you, Brian. Why do you think Philippines today continues to attract foreign interest and investment? Like, what is it that do they see?
So, technically, there's a couple of really important things that you can only find in a few countries that tend to get a lot of business investment. So one is level of education. So
Oh,
there's a high level of STEM education, so science, technology, engineering, maths. There's only a few countries in the world that still maintain high levels of graduates in that space. So technically qualified, when I say technically qualified, I mean that STEM areas.
right.
Those qualifications are precursors to doctors, accountants, computer scientists. And in countries like Australia, where we have a real shortage of those skills because our school system is a bit antiquated and doesn't encourage you know young people to actually go into those streams because they fear it's difficult. Yeah, it is actually quite a treasured capability. And so you may not notice because you live in
Mm,
Manila and you live in the Philippines, but you
right.
have a high number, not only a high number of universities, it's a large population, but the
Mm-hmm.
number of graduates coming out with technical degrees, engineering, maths, computer science,
Yeah.
accounting, medical sciences is really still high.
Mm,
Whereas in Australia, we tend to actually have moved towards the arts sort of, graduate. So we have people coming out with art, with, history. Not bad. And I'm
mm,
not criticizing that people are going into the softer side
yeah.
of education, and we need those people too. But when you have a shortage of engineers and computer scientists and people who can understand complex and solve complex problems logically,
Mm,
it actually hurts your economy.
right. So is it more on the humanities area?
Tends to attract. Our universities tend to be pushing out more of those graduates now. The students that graduate in Sydney universities that have the STEM education
Mm,
tend to go back to their countries to actually work.
that's a very interesting view because from what I know, and my perspective may be limited,
Mm.
I have seen and known a few of my batchmates that are in the medical field who would go to Australia actually to pursue further studies. So it's
Yeah.
quite it's a contrast perspective of Mhm.
So,
Mm,
so, so the second reason is that Filipinos have a high degree of language capability. So English as a first language and
mm,
is very, very strong. So
right.
there's no need for accent adjustment. So in the old days, we used to actually train people how to speak English in an American way, in a European way, so that they would sound more familiar to their customers. Yeah, in the
Mm,
Philippines, you don't have to do that. The language capability is really high, and you've got French-speaking enclaves. You've got enclaves in Mindanao that actually speak foreign languages as well really well if you wanted to have a second language perspective.
like yeah.
Yeah.
But then now, so from our recent episode, Brian, I think it's the AI episode.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then so there we talked about um the level of skill, right? And when it comes to the Filipinos, yes, it really is an advantage in terms of the level of education and the language proficiency. But then with coupling or layering that with AI, is that even going to be enough given when we look at the ground in terms of the skill level of Filipinos? Some studies would argue that we are still at the low skill spectrum compared to what is actually needed in today's labor demands. Right now, do you have any thoughts on that? Because right now I'm very conflicted with
Well,
how how we are as an economy since the Philippines is a service-based labor-heavy
yeah.
economy.
So,
Yeah.
so the third reason why I like the Philippines for business is the fact that emotional intelligence and the ability to understand and communicate with customers in a
Mm,
very customer friendly way. Call it customer service.
mm-hmm.
I call it emotional intelligence because it
Yeah.
actually requires a lot of things that AI doesn't have today. Right? Not
Mm,
sentient enough to understand emotion. It can't
right.
understand inflection of voice. It can't understand tone. So when you're, even at the lowest level, and let's pick a call center agent who's actually taking calls from
Yeah.
disgruntled customers or for people who are stuck with something, they want to change a password. The agent on the other end is always nice. They always answer with a cheery tone. It actually just changed the perspective of the customer because of the way that they're being spoken to. And that you can't find anywhere else. You only find it in the Philippines. So you can't even find it in other high customer service countries like India, Vietnam, or others, you have to train people to actually respond in a particular way. In the Philippines, it's natural. So that for that first level call center, even with AI in the play, my
Yeah.
call is that, yeah, eventually when AI becomes sentient and has the ability to actually sense emotional content through voice
Mm.
or even through
Yeah.
facial recognition, um,
Yeah.
then perhaps it becomes a threat. But I think we're going to see a big wave, it hasn't come yet, of people pushing back against automated AI responses and automated AI voices and
Yeah.
automated AI call centers and want to speak to a person. So people may actually start choosing product and service based
Correct.
on the fact that you're going to be the phone's going to be answered by a human.
Correct. Because
Now,
even
I'll tell,
now, with chatbots, people are still pushing back with it, and they still want human touch.
yeah,
And
and reality, in reality, Danny, the chatbot only covers about 20% of that conversation. It actually
correct.
hands off to a human when it gets
Correct.
complicated, right?
Correct.
That hasn't changed in 10 years.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. It might be
Yeah.
faster, it might understand more nuances in language with NLP, but it's still not at the point where it's going to replace a human. Now, I'll tell
Mm.
you a story. Like during COVID,
Yeah.
when everything got locked down,
Mm-hmm.
I was using a particular carrier for my internet access. Yeah, one of
Yeah.
the larger ones here in Australia. And
Yeah.
we lost the connection. So I couldn't work. I couldn't go anywhere because we're restricted
Yeah.
in travel. So I had to jump on the phone to actually solve the technical problems on the phone.
Mm-hmm.
And it was really frustrating. It took me a week to actually speak to a human being because everything was automated. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So I abandoned that company, canceled my membership,
Oh.
my service with them, and went to a company that advertised that all their phones were answered by a human. Right. And I'm
So
still with
they
them.
weren't able to resurrect you as a customer anymore.
Yeah. No, not at all. Not for internet services. So now I've got a provider that if I have a technical problem, I call them. My phone gets
Yeah.
answered by a human. The person
Yeah.
helps me resolve the problem, on the spot. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's done. So, I think we're about to see that wave actually kick in. And, but I'll temper that with the fact that the Philippines is in the firing line when it comes to those low level jobs and the slow sort of movement towards AI bots. And that will happen. But that happened when the internet came. You probably weren't born yet, but yeah, when the internet came into the world, we saw the use of libraries go down. You know,
Hey,
so,
I was alive already by that time. I even remember I was in elementary. We still had library cards.
yeah. Oh, so
We
you
had
remember
to-
going to the library?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So
I'm not
I
that
remember,
young.
my first degree. I did all my research sitting in the library because there were reference books that you couldn't check out, and so you
Yeah.
had to use them in the library. You had to
Mhm.
photocopy the pages that you wanted if you needed to take them home. Right?
Correct. But now with ChatGPT, the research of the kids today is just so
Yeah, so
yeah.
different. So
Yeah.
different. So
It
did
is.
you had the internet when you were in university, I'm assuming. So your experience would have been very
Yeah.
different. Yeah.
Yes, but we still had to reference actual books actually. So I studied in De La Salle University, Manila. I believe we
Yeah.
had the biggest libraries then. The Henry C. Library was already up at that time, so it was a
Mm.
great access to reference materials.
Yeah. It's so much easier now, right? So, when you were taught to actually how to actually research in a library, that
Yeah.
skill is still priceless today. I still use it in my DBA at AIM.
Yeah,
Yeah. I still use the methodology, but it's just faster.
correct. And I don't know, I just have a bias with the smell of the books.
Yeah, books always smell good.
But how do you think do we compare to, let's say, our neighboring countries like the Vietnam and Indonesia? Because I remember when we do regional strategies before, it would always be the comparison, right? It's always Vietnam, Indonesia, and the Philippines. And then we would always, in an MNC company that I've worked before, we would always be vetted against each other in terms of who gets to perform better, who gets to produce better results and stuff like that.
Yeah, so there is a longitudinal study that gives you all that perspective. My perspective is that the Philippines has actually done really well in the last 15-20 years in terms of climbing up the GDP curve. right? So for all intents and purposes, if you look over the 15-year span, lifestyle has increased, spending power has increased. I walk around now in shopping centers that never existed in Manila. I see brands in shops that never existed in Manila. I see food on the shelves in supermarkets. Supermarkets never existed when I was growing up there. They were small sari stores, right?
Yeah.
Um, and now you have a globalized selection of food and drink and everything else that you potentially could find anywhere else in the world, right? So from that perspective, I think just from a visual observation perspective, I think the 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 middle class in the Philippines have grown significantly, and they are able to afford the luxuries that perhaps was only a Western concept 15-20 years ago. It is behind, however, in terms of the ability to actually put government policy into practice, right? And that's an execution problem, a policy problem. And if you look at the latest competitiveness survey, I think it's gone backwards by 1 or 2 points, perhaps insignificant statistically, but it's still not finding its best self, if I can say it that way.
Yeah.
And that's an execution problem. So that's the downside of the personality traits we spoke about earlier.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
That execution is not strength when you have the mindset and ability that, oh yeah, it should be okay. If I can do it tomorrow, I'll
Correct.
sort it out tomorrow. Tomorrow
Correct.
will be a better day, right? So that can affect your ability to actually execute on what is good policy. If you compare the policy sort of ability to for your government, irrespective of who they are, to actually create really good policies, that's in line with a country like Singapore or
Mm.
you know um you know I wouldn't say Malaysia, but Vietnam, or
Mm.
one of those fast moving economies that have always been up in the front. The problem is not the policy, it's actually the execution of that policy.
Correct.
And I'll give you an example. The Philippine government recently came out with a statement to say that now we're going to be like Singapore, and you'll be able to set up your business in a day, right? In Singapore, it's a couple of hours. In the
Yeah.
Philippines, it's going to be, we're going to strive towards a couple of hours, but we're going to do it in a day. Currently, it takes close to 60 days to set up your business because of all the different permits that you might need and the processes. And it's still very manual. It's not digital. So in some places in the Philippines, you can set up your business in a day. In others, it still takes 45 days because they haven't actually moved to that new standard, which is mandated by the government.
True. I mean, it's still a good North Star to strive for it. But then I agree with you on the execution part. I mean, if I look at the Philippine economy in itself, we're a consumer driven economy, but there are signals in terms of the shift that is happening. We see more and more Filipinos wanting to start their own businesses. It's done by a BCG study that was released last year. I mean, the top Filipino dream is to start their own business so that they can provide for their family, etc. But then it's more of on how do we embed the business acumen to the Filipinos and shift it from a consumer to a producer economy.
And there are other factors, Danny. I think, I can see trends in the Philippines in terms of valuation of startups.
Mm,
Let's
yes.
take fintechs, for example, right? And you're involved in that space because you do quite a lot of conferences and you sit on panels, etc. So you can see that, the valuation of fintechs, which, traditionally in the Philippines have been fairly undervalued, even though the population is huge. It's 120 million Filipinos. You actually have a population internally to have quite a vibrant startup community, right? But outside of the Philippines, when you're actually looking to attract capital, those valuations don't encourage people to invest because they don't get their return on their investment. So you're better off investing in Singapore or in Australia because the valuations are high. So as an investor or as someone with who manages capital, I know that I can get my 33+% in return on investment year on year when I put it into countries that have a high valuation for businesses. Now that may be all industries, but in fintech certainly, that's what I've seen. But I'm seeing the valuations actually start to increase and flop. So I think there was one business, I can't remember its name, but has just achieved the highest funding round. It's a Filipino business.
Mm.
Um, that is looking at assessing lending behavior in the microfinance space. External investor,
Yeah.
highest ever in the Philippines. So it's getting there. It's getting there. Eventually, yeah, I think eventually it will actually be a very, very great pace because population is still growing, and what we spoke about earlier in terms of economic spending power is high. When you get those two things happening at the same time, you get a vibrant investment.
I want to shift our conversation, Brian, into behavior, behavior and cultural dynamics. Because we've been talking about consumers, Filipinos. There's a shift starting, right? Are there any behavioral patterns that you noticed specific here in the local context in terms of leadership effectiveness?
Yeah. So I'll talk about it in the terms of a group of characteristics called social capital. So
Okay.
if you look at social capital as a definition, it talks about values and norms. It
Mm-hmm.
talks about trust, and it talks
Mm-hmm.
about network, right? And
Mm-hmm.
and talking it in the sense of your community. So if you
Mm-hmm.
look at a barangay
Yeah.
or a small city, and I like to talk about the barangay because it's actually a small ecosystem of a
Mm-hmm.
community, and it almost got its own economic engine, right,
Correct.
in the Philippines, where people help each other. So let's look at trust. In that space, the Philippines is quite unique in the ability to foster trust, right? It's got good norms and values based on its religious and cultural background. So, it's the value set that is quite universal and people understand. Yeah, Filipinos are naturally networking. They're quite heavily networked in their community.
Yeah.
So you would know your neighbor really well, and if they got into trouble, you would actually go out of your way to help them. Right? That's not the case in every country. So you combine those unique perspectives in a Filipino context, and you actually have quite an interesting ingredient set for good leaders. When you look at your leaders, the people that
Mm.
the consider leaders, do you see a uniqueness in the Philippines that you would not find anywhere else?
I think here, my current organization is just the first one that I have worked with Filipino leaders actually. Previous ones are foreign. And the most distinct one that I would say is how much weight we put into the relationship aspect as a leadership style. It has both pros and cons, I would say. Like sometimes I would still prefer, maybe it's a personal preference to prefer like a direct way of doing things. But then the relationship aspect really is the one that's highlighted for me when it comes to Filipino leadership.
Yeah. So one of my classmates, he's quite well known in the Philippines. His name is
Uh-huh.
Davido. I'll put a shout out to him because he's
Yeah.
actually studying this for his doctoral thesis. So he's studying the concepts of Filipino leadership
Uh-huh.
in digital transformation space.
Yeah.
And watch this space. He writes about it in his many books, but
Mm.
watch this space. In the next year or two, you'll see him start to write about the unique ingredients in the Philippines and
Mm.
concepts. I won't spoil it, but the concepts that actually drive a unique Filipino leader. And in my social capital space, what I'm looking at the social capital component of leadership from a lending perspective, but I'll apply it to a general leadership concept, right? I
Mm.
see an unusual number of females in leadership positions in the Philippines. Now that's quite unique, right?
Mm.
May not notice that elsewhere, or it may be more engineered elsewhere. And that means it's
Oh.
part of a DEI program, or a
Right.
part of let's put females in leadership positions. Let's have special women leaders forums, etc. In
Mm.
the Philippines, it seems to be a natural thing that females take quite a leadership position while preserving their Filipinaness, if that makes sense.
That's true. Actually, I think that dates back to pre-colonial times wherein the community is truly led by a woman.
Yes.
Given that our ancestors pre-colonial were heavy on the spiritual aspect before the Catholicism arrived here in the Philippines. And so the women, they have this distinct connection to a divine source. That's why, in terms of the interpretations, having the visions, etc., those are being translated to the woman. The woman is the vessel for the source to put it out here in the physical realm. So that's how I think it's a it's an evolutionary thing. But I'm glad that right now women are still the major authority, I would say.
Yeah, first female president in Asia was a Filipino.
Mhm.
Or still hasn't had a female president or prime minister. A lot
Yeah.
of countries in the region, Indonesia hasn't had one.
Yeah.
They're all rival economies and probably doing slightly better,
Mhm.
or a lot more better than the Philippines. So you can put that on the positive ledger side, right? Of why you should invest or why you should actually consider the as a location.
Plus, there's that care that we have,
Yeah,
that we naturally have, and
yeah.
even in households, the mothers are the ones that um, control the financials. So I would hear some of my uncles say that, oh, I cannot really spend my money even though I generate this much money because it's my wife who is managing my money.
And rightly so, right? So yeah, rightly so. Yeah, and yeah, we all, in my last, delivery center, software development center that we set up in Clark, in Angeles City. Yeah, we had a preference for hiring women if we could find them as software developers and technical people. Right now, because of our own laws here in Australia, we couldn't actually openly state that. But if we had a similar candidate between a man and a woman, and they're
Yeah.
technically qualified, we take the woman because
Oh.
we knew that the work quality would be better. Yeah, and it's fascinating to me that the Filipinas can maintain that leadership style, which is a very different style at work, and still be a mom, a wife at home, which is a very
Mhm.
different style of leadership, right? Because it requires different skill sets to be that leader in both those different contexts, and I think that's quite unique in the Philippines.
Interesting. How do you think can I'm really touching on the behavior aspect now, Brian. How do you think can behavioral science then help leaders adapt across markets? Because given the trend that we're going in right now, right, in terms of globalization and having cross-cultural labor force, how would that intersection play?
It's an interesting question. Behavior doesn't have a nationality. Um,
Mhm.
it doesn't have a gender, it's just behavior. So I think, for we already see, really good Filipino leaders, male and female, and it has a particular style to it. I don't think it's been studied. I don't think it's been measured. It's probably worthwhile as a future research project to look at, and see whether there's any significance in the behaviors, which are universal, and
Yeah.
whether applied in the Philippines, those behaviors, like fluid intelligence, like
Hmm.
emotional quotient, like ability to delay gratification. So those core 12, they call it Ocean 5, those 12 or so behaviors that you would identify as core, whether there is a difference in a Filipino leader versus an Asian leader outside of the
Yeah.
Philippines, and you'd have to compare country by country.
Mm.
Um, and see whether there's a significance. I don't know the answer, but
Yeah.
it's worth studying. Yeah, but
Yeah.
just by anecdotally, I think there is a difference,
Yes.
right? It just needs to be
Yeah.
measured. And
Yeah. Because my working theory is that behavior is more or less conditioned by your environment, right? Like it's so there would be nuances to it.
yeah, so it's your environment is made up of your upbringing environment, your home
Mm.
environment.
Mm.
When you went to school and how you actually
Mm.
picked up your intelligence and learning, and then your
Mm.
professional environment, right? So that would actually be the three core components of your natural leadership style. Yeah,
Yeah.
everything else is learned behavior, right? So you can learn how to lead in the military, which is very different from learning how to lead in a bank or learning how to lead in a fintech. Yeah, you can learn those aspects of style that you need to apply your natural leadership ability and the traits that you naturally have into the situation that you're actually applying it to. So, those areas need to be identified
Mm.
and then measured for significance.
But how does, based from your experience, Brian, I'm sure you've worked cross culturally. How does good cross cultural leadership look like?
Okay, another good question, Danny. I'd like to think that good cross-cultural leadership is first based in understanding of the environment, the culture, the religious background, and all those things. And some countries have multiple components of that. You might have multiple religions in one place, and you have to
Yeah.
actually consider that. You then have to consider language and translation errors and translation issues. We all speak English, but we all speak English in a different way, at
Correct.
different speeds,
Correct.
with different intonations, with different slang words, right?
Yeah.
So, your English and my English may be completely different when we're actually speaking to each other because, I may use some Australian colloquialisms that,
Mhm.
just hit your brain and bounce back, right?
Yeah.
Because you don't understand it. And you may use some, Filipino sayings that, they're in English, but, it doesn't actually make sense to me because I
Yeah.
don't have that background. So
Right.
all those things, outside of, just the core leadership capability of, leading, being inquisitive, being curious, being considerate, all the
Mm.
soft things about leadership, right? It's not about being directive. It's not about, and my leadership style has been honed by the fact that I spent time in the military and
Yeah.
I've spent time in many countries as a leader and as a
Yeah.
follower,
Yeah.
and you pick it up, right? So listening more than speaking, having, if you're familiar with Daniel Kahneman's concept of system 1 and system 2 brain thinking.
Yes. Yes. I
Yeah.
think it was adapted also in one of the books that I've read, The Road to Character. He called
Yes,
it Adam 1 and Adam 2.
that's right.
Mhm.
So using
Yeah.
that in an effective way so that depending on the style of decisions you're making, ensuring that you're not using system 1 to make a system 2 decision because you're going to get it wrong based on the research that Kahneman did and
Yeah.
prospective. So I think those aspects that we don't talk about much because it's hard to talk about in context and it's different in every country almost are big factors in being successful. So you might be a really successful leader in the Philippines in the financial services area that you operate in. If I took you and put you in New York, you'd probably struggle for the first couple of years because you're learning the new
Correct.
style, right?
Right.
Um, and
Yeah.
that's part of actually exploring your ability to then flex that leadership and be a global leader.
To that note, Brian, what do you think then foreign leaders get right and wrong when engaging with Filipino talent and teams? Let's go with the right ones first, and before we go with the wrong ones.
Okay, the right ones. I think foreign leaders in the Philippines, what do they get right? A lot of things they get right. I think there's the ability to actually use your leadership style from other areas that I would, a Western leadership style to drive execution, right?
Mm.
Which is a weakness that we spoke about earlier, and teach a local team how execution matters. It might be the best idea in the world, but if you actually don't work at making it a live opportunity or turning an idea into reality,
Yeah.
it's just an idea, right?
Yeah.
And it's a wonderful idea, that sits in our
Mm.
brain and that doesn't do anything. So I
Yeah.
think that, foreign leaders tend to bring that angle of execution.
Mm.
Um, what they do badly. Firstly, what do you think they do well? Foreign leaders. Have you had an experience of working for someone who's not Filipino?
I think on that end, what they do well is that I don't have to guess what they want. Very clear in terms of what they want to happen. I think that's one because with Filipinos, we have a big tendency to be, we're an indirect culture, I would say. So there are a lot of like hints to drop instead of actually saying it straightforward.
Yeah.
You get what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think that's what's good for foreign leaders. Yeah, I think that's.
Yeah, call it, diplomacy. I think
Mm-hmm. Yes.
you have a
Yeah.
word for it in Tagalog. Is it bahala na?
I don't think it's bahala na, but it's really more of Filipinos are very sensitive people.
Yeah.
So we really go lengths in terms of trying not to, let's say, offend or cause
Or
any
hurt. Yeah.
bad emotions to our kapwa. Yeah. So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
So the straightforward answer, doesn't always work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
I think the bad of leaders that come into the Philippines is that they tend to preserve this whole concept of power distance, rather
Mm,
than break down the barriers and change it, because we can see,
yeah.
that a progressing economy comes with the progression and a shortening of that power distance in all the metrics, in all the components of it. And when we see people come to the Philippines and they like the fact that someone carries their bag into the office or is there to call you yo mom sir po,
Yeah,
uh, so they preserve that because it gives them an ego boost. But I think that's something that leaders do badly because they don't try and break down that barrier.
that's true.
Mm.
That's true. If you're a leader here in the Philippines, you're actually treated as royalty. Yeah,
That needs to change.
I know.
Yeah, leaders everywhere are, but I think there's a subtle difference. Yeah,
Mm.
yeah. What do you think are the weaknesses for foreign leaders in the Philippines?
Weaknesses, I think foreign leaders can do a lot more exposure on the ground instead of heavily relying on westernized and global market research studies. Yeah, because it's far, far, far different from what is actually being experienced on the ground. I would say, and I would advocate for any foreign leader who would want to set up business here to experience Philippines on the ground.
And spend
And
time there.
yeah, and not within Makati or BGC, but really go
Go out,
outside. Yeah.
go outside. It's so different outside.
Yes.
Yeah, I think you
Yeah.
get you get a sense of the real Philippines when you leave Makati or the big cities.
Correct.
Even the second tier and the third tier cities are so different.
Correct.
Um, and worth it.
Every region has its own flavor. I remember doing a provincial strategy before because our market is saturated already, right, in the NCR. So a way to expand is really to go outside. And then what we found is that every province, not even every region, every province has its own way. And as you said, economy. I mean, to your length, it's a barangay, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So how you the salespeople that needs to be there has to be someone from there. Yes, has to be a local, and yeah. So that's why the Philippines is like its own world. I would say, where every region is like a continent that you could.
Many countries in one place.
Yes, yeah, yeah.
And even the language differences, you speak different languages in different places, and sometimes they're so different that even Filipinos from Manila can't understand.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. So me, I wouldn't know really how life is like in Mindanao if I don't go there and experience it. Yeah.
Yeah, and if you did go there, you'd still be a foreigner for 10 years while you
Yes.
live there.
Correct.
It's no different from me going and living in Mindanao.
I can sometimes be a tourist in my own country. I haven't even explored most of the islands yet. I've been making an effort, but I haven't explored most of it yet.
You can spend a lifetime doing that. Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's a worthwhile thing to do in a lifetime.
Yes. There's actually a trend wherein the Philippines map, right? You can shade the province if you've been there already, and then it's a yeah.
I've been to many places outside of Manila, and
Mhm.
I've actually experienced the vast tapestry of the difference of culture and food. Even food is different.
Yeah.
Uh, and all the other aspects, that you would take for granted,
Correct.
are completely different, and it's wonderful. You don't actually have to leave your country to go on a holiday. You can actually do it.
That's true. I try to finish first the Philippines before I go to extremes and going outside.
It's worthwhile. It's a worthwhile endeavor. I would encourage it.
But okay, let me pause a little bit and digest what we have talked about so far. So, most of our conversation has been mainly about social capital and behavior, and it's really about and leadership styles. I recall our previous guest, he mentioned that the Philippines is still in industry 3.0, whereas globally some areas are already at 6.0.
Yeah, but you can counter argue that and say that if you look at mobile phone usage in the Philippines, that far exceeds other more developed countries. So are you really at 3.0? No, people are doing digital cash. They're transferring money. They may not have a bank account, but they're actually spending their dollars using alternative methods. Yeah, sure. I'm not sure whether that's correct to say that it's behind.
Yeah.
It might be behind in some aspects, but there's
Right.
other aspects like I know that if
Mm,
let's create an example. If I started a business in healthcare and
yeah.
and and created a digital healthcare platform that would
Mm,
allow people in the barangays to access medical care using an app, yeah,
mm,
I get to 95% of the population because they all have phones, right? If I
yeah.
did that in another country, which is a mature economy, I'd struggle because connectivity would be a problem.
Interesting.
So is it really behind? I don't know.
Yeah, I like, you know what I like about the podcast is that I get contrast perspectives from the guests when it comes to certain topics.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
look at you can pull examples, right? So if
Mhm.
you've been to the US and you've tried to spend money and tried to pay for something with your phone, yeah, from even as early as 5 years ago, you'd struggle. You'd have to actually carry a physical credit card or a physical bank card to make a payment, and they'd have to swipe it, yeah, yeah,
Mm,
the pin to actually execute the transaction, right?
very interesting.
Checks are still being used in the US to actually do payments, physical checks, and they still
Oh,
sell. Pitney Bowes still sells check processing machines in banks to actually automate the process of reading a check and making sure that it meets all the criteria as a real check.
very
Right now,
interesting.
in India, for example,
Hmm.
everything's done on your mobile phone. Right? No cash exchange hands. I can, as a foreigner, I can actually go into a city in rural India and use my phone
Yeah.
to pay something.
Well, it's
So
a.
you have Gcash in the
Mhm.
Philippines, right? That doesn't exist at an infrastructure layer in the US for payment platforms.
Oh,
They're
so
still
that's
stuck
why
in the
most.
1980s. So when you say, Industry 4.0 versus Industry 3.0,
Yeah.
I would question that.
Yeah. I see your perspective. I see it. Yeah.
Yeah. And we take advice from Western countries on how we should digitally transform,
That's
right?
true.
Why?
Like, which brings me to my question in terms of adopting Western frameworks and ways of doing businesses in local context.
Yeah, I think colonialism died after World War II, right? So I think we should actually make sure that it remains dead and properly buried. Yeah, I don't believe that there are any frameworks globally from the
Mm,
West or anywhere else that you can just pick up and apply to any new culture. I think it actually needs to actually be properly considered. It needs to be localized. It needs to be put in a way that can be absorbed by local population from a language, culture, attitude,
yeah,
perspective if you want to be successful. I think gone are the days where you take a Porter's five forces model and just apply it. I think in the Philippines you could
yeah,
apply Porter's five forces, but you'd have to make it Filipino.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah. And
yeah.
I'm probably on the more aggressive side of rebelling. Just taking Western concepts because they were potentially successful in the West and applying them. I
Correct.
disagree. And you see it, right? So we have quite a number of powerful organizations in the Philippines that do really good research. Now, the ability for those researchers and those organizations to get published in Western magazines and Western journals still pretty poor, right?
Mhm.
Because Asia and Asia Pacific countries are not first world economies or large economies, and
Yeah,
so publications, the legacy publications, you
yeah.
know, will tend to favor a Western article versus a piece of research that's done in the Philippines or in Indonesia. We've got to change that. We
I
have a strong research capability. Yeah.
I agree. I think in terms of putting things out there is one thing as a country that we could do more of. Especially case in point, let's say government government initiatives, right? Only when I started studying in AIM was when I became aware of all these government initiatives. But then, if I'm, let's say, an average Filipino who I wouldn't know where to look even for these government initiatives for me to take advantage of, for me to consume, right, and to take part of.
Comes a communication. You've got 120 million people, spread
Yeah.
across a vast geographic area.
Yeah.
You know, your
Yeah.
biggest challenge in the Philippines is communication. Yeah, and you've got multiple languages.
Yeah.
Um, and the government is centrally based in NCRs. You kind of, it's already hard. Yeah,
Mm. Yeah.
yeah.
We need more bridges, not just literally, but also, yeah.
Bridges and tunnels. Yeah. What do you think? Do you think that you've seen, and you sit on the on in a very pivotal position,
Mm.
um, professionally? Do you see just picking up Western concepts, and you've done your masters and you've studied Western management concepts? Do you see them getting picked up and just applied in the Philippines? And what is your ability to grasp whether it's successful or not?
Not really. I mean, even me personally, I still have to translate it in a way that the audience or the people I'm talking to could actually grasp it. Like, I cannot really talk about it textbook wise. It's a lot to do with translation
Yeah.
still.
So you do that naturally, right? You don't
Yeah,
think twice.
yeah. But
Mhm.
it has to have, I think an effective way to do it is through analogies and metaphors, and really find
Ways
real.
of
Yes,
yeah,
yeah, yeah,
communicating
yeah.
a
Yes,
complex concept. Yeah.
yes, correct, correct,
Yeah.
correct.
Yeah, and I think that's the secret. No, it's no more difficult than that. I think if you blindly take it, like it's like using Chat GPT. If you put all the hard work and go and use Chat GPT, you'll actually make yourself dumb. Yeah. But if you think about it, you conceptualize it, and you use it as a tool to sit beside you, and sort of enhance your ability to communicate a concept well. Yeah,
Mm,
then it's powerful,
correct,
and you keep your own intelligence.
correct, correct.
Interesting. Great questions, Danny.
Thank you. I mean, we just go along with it.
Yeah, yeah. It's like a conversation over a coffee.
That's the vibe that we're going for in this
Yeah,
podcast.
good. Well
Just
done.
conversations over coffee. But any advice, or yeah, any advice that you could give to other foreign leaders who would want to set up businesses here, and at the same time Filipino employees who are being led by foreign leaders, so that you could create that bridge that we were
Yeah,
talking
so I'll start with employees, Filipino
about.
employees. Be brave, speak up. Yeah, may not be your natural tendency. Try and find a way to communicate in the lovely diplomatic way that Filipinos do, and get your ideas across. Because that's a great way to show maturity and to advance your professional career. Right. So I think that more of that needs to happen. Um,
Mhm.
so when I do town halls and staff sessions in the Philippines, um, I always struggle to get a question. Right. So I'll say any questions and everyone shuts up to ask a question. So I've gone to the lengths for the leaders to
Mhm.
actually encourage certain people in the audience who I know would not be afraid to
Mm,
to, to up and speak, and I'll actually give them a question to ask.
mm.
Something I've thought about that staff would want to know, and but I'm too afraid to ask. You know,
Yeah.
like when our bonus is going to get paid. Right? It's the end of the year. You're here. We're having a lovely time. We're having a party, but I haven't seen.
Mm.
Nobody would ask that.
But can they though? Would you be offended if they do?
Yeah,
Would you?
so I plant people in the audience, Filipino,
Mm.
that will stand up and ask those questions. And then once people started and they say, "Oh, okay, she stood up and asked a question, you know,
Mm-hmm.
I can too." Right?
Yeah.
And that encourages then people to be a bit more open.
Yeah. Yeah. I
And
would
that's
agree.
my tip. Share it if you have to, because that will actually get you a better outcome in the long term.
That's true. Mhm. I would advocate also for asking questions.
Yeah, I think it's a powerful way You know, it's a powerful way to communicate, especially in an open forum, because everyone learns from it.
That's true. How about from the opposite end?
From a leader's perspective,
Mm-hmm.
what would I recommend for a leader to do in the Philippines? I think be gritty and persevere. And there's lots of things that potentially in the first phase of things that will turn you off progressing your business in the Philippines.
Mm.
Don't give up. Yeah. Keep persevering, because underneath all that is the gold, I would say. Right.
Uh,
And you have to actually make sure you dig deep enough to get to the gold and not give up halfway.
well, that's lovely, Brian. Are
Yeah.
there any things that you are working on currently that are exciting and you would want to share out there?
Yeah, so I've just started with an organization that is talent as a service world in a highly complex industry in accounting. So
Yeah.
we're trying to disrupt and change the way talent is provided to accounting firms across the globe, and how it's managed and how it's actually delivered. Instead of just being a body shop, we're actually doing things that are really, really different, and that's quite exciting. So, everything from our hiring processes to, our reward systems to our ability to actually get the best and allow people to find their best selves. So
Mm.
that's pretty exciting. So that's really on the cutting edge of innovating in an industry, that's as old as old as Christianity, right? Providing capability. So that's pretty exciting. I'm working with a couple of founders on getting and taking their ideas to life. Some really successful, some are going to take a bit more time. Yeah, but the ones that are successful are nice to watch. So I'm at the stage where now I'm actually sort of looking to transition my experience and my knowledge to the next generation so that they can find their best selves. Yeah.
That's good. Thank you so much for being here, Brian.
Thank you so
What
much.
and a lovely conversation with you. And for sure, our audience would have learned a lot from our conversation.
Yeah, and they can reach out to me. I'm on LinkedIn. I answer my own messages. So look out Brian Pereira in Sydney.
Mhm.
There are many Brian Pereiras. Find the one in Sydney. And if you have a question or if you want to continue this conversation, reach out.
Yeah, and if you have any takeaways or thoughts that you would want to add into this conversation, you may comment down below. And we'll see you on the next one. Goodbye.